We live in an era where we are incredibly digitally connected, right? But biologically speaking, we've honestly never been more stressed, isolated, and fragmented. Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're exploring a truly fascinating intersection of biophysics, psychology, and sociology. We are going to dive deep into the hard, measurable science of inner peace to discover how a single regulated breath might not just heal your nervous system, but actually alter the fabric of society itself. The data we're looking at today suggests something incredible. Our internal biological states don't just stay trapped inside of us. They literally ripple outward. So can individual meditation actually reduce global crime rates? I know, it sounds like pure science fiction. No way, right? Yet, sociologists relying on hard public records have documented up to a 70% drop in war casualties during mass meditation events. It is an absolutely mind-bending correlation. Today, we're going to unpack exactly how researchers hypothesize this happens. We're stripping away all the mysticism to look at the rigorous physical mechanics of how physiological calmness might literally be contagious. All right, here's our roadmap for today's explainer. 1. The physiology of peace. 2. Rewiring with guided imagery. 3. Heart coherence and autonomics. 4. The loving-kindness protocol. And 5. The Maharishi effect. We're going to start at the microscopic level of your nervous system and systematically zoom all the way out until we hit the global population. Let's jump right into section 1, the physiology of peace, focusing on the biophysics of inner calm. We really need to move past this myth that meditation is just passively relaxing on a cushion somewhere. Okay, so our bodies are basically always toggling between two modes. On one side, you have the sympathetic threat detection state. That's your fight, flight, or freeze alarm. On the other side is the parasympathetic recovery state, which is where you rest and digest. Now, modern life constantly traps us in that sympathetic alarm state, right? We get shallow chest breathing, high cortisol, the whole shebang. But by consciously engaging the diaphragm, that big muscle at the base of your lungs, we can actively force the body to downregulate the brain's central stress command center. Doing this immediately lowers your heart rate, drops your blood pressure, and literally hits the brakes on stress hormones. To reliably trigger this shift, clinical protocols use a very specific rhythm. Try this: a 4-second inhale, a 2-second hold, and a long 6-second exhale. That specific ratio signals to your brainstem that your environment is entirely safe. As a result, your brain shifts into producing alpha waves, oscillating right between 8 and 12 hertz. This establishes a state of relaxed alertness. It basically acts like a neurological shield, blocking out distracting cognitive inputs so your brain can rest while staying hyperfocused. It's actually the ultimate biological foundation for deep work. Moving on to section 2, rewiring with guided imagery. Here, we'll look at cognitive diffusion and sensory adaptation. Now that the body is physically primed, let's see how mental imagery rewires our stress response. A core therapeutic technique we use here is called cognitive diffusion. Picture yourself standing by a stream. Every anxious thought you have, every looming deadline, you just place onto a leaf, and you simply watch it float away. The crucial mechanism here is treating thoughts as passing neurological events, not absolute truths. You're not pushing the thoughts away, because biologically speaking, pushing creates friction, which just creates more stress. Instead, you're just letting them exist while loosening their grip on your nervous system. It rapidly uncouples your anxiety from your reality. But wait, what if you have a condition called aphantasia? That's the literal inability to visualize mental images. If you can't picture a leaf on a stream, does this still work? Absolutely. The protocol simply adapts to other sensory pathways, totally bypassing the visual cortex. So instead of visualizing a brilliant light, you might use tactile resonance, like listening to low-frequency tones you can physically feel in your chest. Instead of picturing leaves, you use conceptual processing, like imagining abstract thoughts moving along a conveyor belt. The clinical reduction in cortisol and anxiety remains exactly the same. It just goes to show how incredibly adaptable our neuroplasticity really is. Let's look at section 3, heart coherence and autonomics. We're talking about synchronization, not just relaxation. As we master this internal regulation, we enter a highly measurable biophysical state. Heart coherence isn't just some subjective, warm feeling of happiness. It is your body's ultimate physiological efficiency mode. When your nervous, cardiovascular, and hormonal systems sync up, your heart rhythms actually align to a shared frequency of exactly 0.1 hertz. Biofeedback technologies can track this in real time, and striking this exact zero point 0.1 hertz frequency actively stimulates the centers of your brain responsible for foresight, executive decision-making, and emotional resilience. It's a real game changer. And here is a really vital distinction. Coherence is an active state of synchronization, not passive relaxation. You do not need to be blissfully zoned out on a mountaintop to achieve this. In fact, biological neutrality is incredibly powerful. You can maintain this peak physiological mode while doing intense cognitive work, navigating a tough conversation, or even running a marathon. It's a high-performance state. This brings us to Section 4, the Loving Kindness Protocol, expanding the circle of goodwill. Now we're going to take this internal coherence and scale it outward using an ancient neurologically powerful practice called metta. Metta is essentially a structured neurological workout that deliberately trains your brain to extend unconditional compassion. You always start by directing kind wishes toward yourself, which is absolutely crucial for emotional resilience. Then you progressively add weight to the bar. You expand that circle to a loved one, then to a neutral stranger like the guy who makes your coffee. Then, and this is where the serious rewiring happens, you extend it to someone you actively have conflict with. Finally, you expand this goodwill to all life everywhere. It systematically dissolves the brain's barriers of separation. And the downstream biology of this practice? It is staggering. Sending out these ripples of kindness physically increases your vagal tone and triggers a massive release of oxytocin, which is a profound buffer against chronic stress. Even more remarkably, clinical trials show it actually slows cellular aging. It does this by protecting your telomeres, those little protective caps at the ends of your DNA strands. Researchers have even found that strong social connectivity and compassion practices predict a 50% increased chance of longevity. Think about that. You are literally extending your own health span simply by wishing well for others. Which leads us perfectly into Section 5, the Maharishi effect, collective resonance and social entrainment. Here is the ultimate scientific question. If one person's biology changes this dramatically, what happens when thousands of coherent nervous systems interact in the real world? To figure this out, we can look to foundational sociologists like Emil Durkheim, who suggested that society basically operates with a collective consciousness. Modern biophysicists are exploring this exact idea through the lens of group entrainment. I mean, think about it. You already know that stress and panic are highly contagious, right? When you walk into a crowded, anxious room, you feel it immediately. Well, the hypothesis here is that profound peace and physiological coherence might be equally contagious, transmitted through the subtle, mutual synchronization of our biological rhythms. So this brings us to a deeply fascinating concept known as the Maharishi effect. This theory proposes that a unified field of consciousness allows a critical mass of meditators to physically lower the systemic stress of an entire city. Essentially, by achieving deep, synchronized biological coherence together, this group radiates a stabilizing physical influence, and that influence actually calms the collective behavior of the surrounding population. Researchers have even gone so far as to mathematically quantify this. Their models suggest that you don't even need a majority of the population to shift the collective mood. They propose that if just the square root of 1% of a given population enters this state of synchronized coherence, it triggers massive social entrainment. To put that math into perspective, for a city of 1 million people, that would only require 100 coherent individuals to shift the baseline stress of the entire metropolis. And guys, the data gathered around this is just impossible to ignore. In studies conducted during mass group meditation events, researchers noted dramatic statistical anomalies in public records. During these periods of group flow entrainment, where participants' heart rate variability literally aligned with each other, there were significant drops in violent crime. Some localized studies even reported over a 70% reduction in war casualties and terrorist activity. Now, the exact mechanics of how this action at a distance works is still a subject of rigorous scientific debate, but the sheer correlation points to an untapped, profound potential in our collective biology. Which leaves us with a pretty profound realization to end on. We've seen how a single diaphragmatic breath alters your brainwaves, how imagery rewires your stress response, and how your heart's coherence can mathematically entrain with the people around you. If our neurobiology literally ripples out into the environment, then your personal micromental health is not a selfish pursuit at all. It is an act of global consequence. So, if your peace influences the whole, how will you choose to regulate your mind today? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep breathing, and I'll see you next time.